Welcome to Rajya Sabha TV. You're watching a special show on Parliamentary Standing Committee. I'm Amritanshu Rai. In this show, we bring to you in-depth coverage of recommendations of Standing Committee on the functioning of ministries and its departments. Today, we will talk about the report of the Standing Committee on Finance. The Standing Committee is opposed to the idea of death penalty as provided for in the NDPS Amendment Bill. According to the committee, the provision violates the Constitution.
The Standing Committee has said that death penalty suggested under the Section 31A of the Narcotic, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances or NDPS Amendment Bill 2011 is in violation of the Constitution. The Standing Committee also noted that some terms in the proposed amendment are vague and unspecific. It says the proposed amendment will weaken the rationalized penalty structure introduced by the amendment to the NDPS Act in 2001.
We heard the different stakeholders and they have expressed several opinion before this committee. Certain things is the vague nature of the definition in the definition and the causes, and second thing the harassment factor, and third thing they have want to minimize the punishment process. These type of things had been raised by several stakeholders.
इस विधेयक में एक बड़ा मुद्दा यह है कि those who indulge in illegal narcotic trade, they should be outright mandatory बना दिया है कि उसको डेथ पेनल्टी दिया जाएगा. ये कोलंबिया जैसे देश में ये होगा, जैसे साउथ अमेरिका में अमेरिका के प्रेशर के ऊपर जहाँ काफ़ी बड़े पैमाने से नारकोटिक्स पैदा होते हैं, या अफ़गानिस्तान में आप कर सकते हैं, या कोलंबिया या जो भी लैटिन अमेरिकन कंट्रीज़ में है. इंडिया में इस तरह का नारकोटिक्स उत्पाद नहीं होता, नारकोटिक्स ट्रेड नहीं हो रहा.
Narcotic, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, popularly known as NDPS Act, was enacted on 16 September 1985. The NDPS Act prohibits, except for medical and scientific purposes, the manufacture, production, possession, sale, purchase, transport, warehousing, use, export and import of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. The NDPS Act was amended twice in 1989 and 2001. The NDPS Bill 2011 aims at rectifying anomalies noticed during the implementation of the Act.
The main objective of the Act is to rectify the anomalies and to strengthen the Act itself. But the committee expressed its displeasure. While the government has waited for this long time, more than 10 years, to rectify the anomalies which is reflected at the time of implementation, and several times Apex Court has noted and mentioned in their judgments with regard to this Act.
हम यही मान के चलते हैं कि ओपियम और नारकोटिक्स का जो भी इंटॉक्सिकेंट्स हैं उसका मेडिसिनल वैल्यू है, मेडिसिन के लिए उसको व्यवहार होना चाहिए. इसलिए इसको एक रेस्ट्रिक्टिव कल्टीवेशन के लिए अलाउड है. पर जो पहले भी जो लॉ बना था और अभी बरकरार है, वो लॉ है कि उसको मॉनिटरिंग स्टेट गवर्नमेंट करेगी. किस इलाके में किस तरह वो उत्पादन होगा, कल्टीवेट होगा, किस तरह उसको फिर हार्वेस्ट होगा.
The committee is not satisfied with the bill in the present form, especially with the assertion of the Department of Revenue that slight changes to NDPS rules would suffice to address the issue raised by the stakeholders.
Actually, the government got enough time to make their homework for this bill. Actually, they have wasted more than 10 years. After the last amendment, it is 2001, then it is 2012, they came with this new bill. The government did not did their homework in the proper manner. That is the view of the committee.
Perhaps the person or those group of persons who have drafted the bill, they are not, this is my apprehension, perhaps they are not aware of the ground realities. क्योंकि जैसे मैंने कहा ना, 3 स्टेज है एक पॉपी प्लांट का. तो आप जब क्वांटिटी स्मॉल क्वांटिटी है तो नारकोटिक्स का क्वांटिटी है, या पूरा जो सीज किया गया जो चीज़ पूरा प्लांट के साथ वो भी पूरा नारकोटिक्स है, ये डिफाइन नहीं हुआ। ऐसी कई चीज़ें हैं जिसमें डेफिनेशन was required, and I don't think this can be done in the rules when they will be framing the rules, but that will come later. Why not do it in the bill itself?
The Standing Committee has recommended abolition of death penalty as mandated under Section 31A of the proposed bill. Death penalty is reserved for the rarest of the rare cases. The committee also said that NDPS Act has been enacted in line with the International Drug Conventions, which do not mandate imposition of death penalty. However, the committee stopped short of declaring Section 31A as unconstitutional.
Actually, we demand for a rationalization of its punishment. There are several anomalies still persisting in this new act. There should be some space for the judiciary, whatever is needed in this type of crimes and offences. Depends upon the nature of the crime. There should be some space for the judiciary to decide what type of punishment is needed.
No, actually, what has happened is, once somebody is apprehended, he is put behind bars for 10 years. And actually what is happening in our country, because we are not talking on the bill now, we are talking on the ground realities. If somebody who is a carrier, he is actually not the main culprit, he is just transporting the material, the banned material from one place to another. He is apprehended because that is found in his body or in the bag that he is carrying. He is apprehended, the court sends him to jail, and the drug lord will be fighting that case, will be providing some monetary benefit to the family. But actually we are not apprehending the actual culprit.
The committee also noticed that government took 10 years to rectify the anomalies noticed in the amendment effected in 2001. The committee was not convinced by the reason stated by the Ministry of Finance for the delay. The committee has accused the government of non-seriousness on the issues like curbing the trade of narcotics and drugs and wants amendments in the bill. Let's see how the government responds with cameraman Vijay, Zaga Murtaza, Rajya Sabha TV.
The Standing Committee has indicted the government for undue delay in bringing in the legislation. To tell us more on the issue, I am joined by my colleague Zaigam Murtaza. Zaigam, what are the objections of the committee?
See, the committee is clear in its view. The committee has said that bring the bill that should be comprehensive and should have the wide scope to curb the illegal trade of drugs and narcotics in India. And the bill the government has brought, the committee has said that it is vague in nature and the terms and definitions are not clear and it will surely not meet the objective.
We spoke to Dr. Yogendra Trivedi, member Standing Committee on Finance, and began by asking him the importance of the bill.
That somehow or other the narcotics and drugs provisions should be so strict that people will think 100 times before getting into this, spoiling the life more especially of the younger generation. You might probably be surprised that younger generation who are otherwise leading a normal life, they are made drug addicts by putting drugs in the soft drinks, or by given to the young children selling drugs outside their schools, which they would not realize, and eventually they become drug addicts. And once you are a drug addict, I have seen the life of drug addicts. When they are kept away from drugs, I know about a girl who had become a drug addict, and when she was when the family came to realize it, and they kept her at home in a room, she was behaving mad. She was pull her hair because the withdrawal symptoms were unbearable. So these people are really very guilty, and I think they should be given the severest of punishment. Now, at the same time, it's a very tricky subject. The legislation should be drafted in a very thoughtful manner. And we must also draw a distinction between some drugs, which are very lethal, and some drugs which are not so damaging.
And you think that the government is in the right direction?
So certainly believe, as a member of the Standing Committee, I believe that before coming out with very harsh laws, the entire situation should be studied, and the laws should be made such which can be implemented and which can be effective. Not merely making laws, make such laws which will stand the test, of judicial scrutiny, and at the same time which can be understood by people and people should accept it. Laws will be successful only when people for whom the laws are made understand it and they appreciate it.
Sir, I just need your own perception. Can the law alone can bring a change?
Law has to step in. There are certain, education is also a very important thing. That children should be educated. I have seen the girls who go to the pubs. They don't know what they are doing, and somebody gives them some addiction in the drug, in the soft drinks, and thereafter these women are molested. Anything can happen once you are under the influence of drug. So law can play a little role. I don't think law is the effective answer to everything. Otherwise, we will have a very just, very comfortable, very appropriate society by having only laws and then going to sleep.
The committee has said that the definitions are not clear, the terms are vague, and the legislation is incomplete in itself.
No, standing committee has spent laborious hours and have given suggestions. Those suggestions should be taken into consideration and government should implement them in the bill, incorporate them in the bill, and a proper bill should come before the parliament and should be passed as early as possible. So many legislations are pending. It's a tragedy, that these legislations which can affect the life of so many people, the nature of our economy, the nature of our society.
What are your own views on this NDPS bill?
Don't make laws, which are unenforceable. I will give you the illustration that there was at one time a law in England that pickpocketers will be hanged in public. And when a pickpocketer was hanged, there used to be a crowd gathered to see him being hanged. And I had seen a cartoon in Punch or somewhere where it was shown that when there is a hanging taking place, one small boy is picking somebody's pocket from amongst the crowd. So merely death sentence by itself is a mechanical way of handling a situation. There can't be a death sentence or harsh sentence irrespective of the quantity.
Any other suggestion?
I am of the opinion that all these welfare legislation should have a deterrent effect, but one must take into consideration the state of the society, the pros and cons of every legislation, and try to bring out a legislation which is palatable to people, which people can understand and would like to follow. The people's concurrence is very necessary for the effective use of any legislation.
It's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will tell you about the other recommendations as suggested by the Standing Committee. Welcome back. The committee has asked the government to pass the bill without any delays. At the same time, the committee has recommended several changes in the NDPS amendment bill.
While agreeing on necessity of amendments proposed in the bill, the committee said there was a need for having a more comprehensive and broad-based legislation on narcotic and psychotropic substances. The committee noted that several terms contained in the proposed amendments are vague and unspecific and there is a need for clarity.
इंडिया के ज़रिए कुरियर जाता है बाहर और अफ़गानिस्तान से हो या कहीं दूसरे म्यांमार से हो, जो भी हो, इसलिए हमारा यहाँ जो नारकोटिक्स का जो कल्टीवेशन होता है, नारकोटिक्स का जो हार्वेस्ट होता है, जिस तरह मेडिसिनल प्लांट के लिए ज़रूरी है, उसमें इस तरह का एक मैंडेटरी क्लॉज रखना फाइनेंस कमेटी ने पूरा उसको नकारा है और उन्होंने कहा कि इस तरह इसको आप अमेंड करिए. वी आर नॉट इन फेवर ऑफ दिस टाइप ऑफ प्रोविजन, पेनल सच ए very strong provision.
The stakeholders have raised the misuse of this act one side, and other side the harassment by the officers by misinterpreting this. Actually, the earlier acts gave an avenue for this misinterpretation and harassment and misuse of this act. For rectify that, we should strengthen the bill by clearly concrete and precise definitions. Here, this commercial quantity and symbol quantity, it can be interpreted in a different manner.
The committee suggested that changes in the definition of quantity of drugs or psychotropic substances in the apprehended material. Clause 7A and 12A of the Section 2 should be amended suitably to spell out in clear terms the differences between small quantity and commercial quantity. The committee agreed that the quantity can be a parameter to distinguish between the drug trafficker and user. Also, the quantity will enable the courts and law enforcement agencies to award punishment commensurate with the seriousness of the crime.
बड़ा मुद्दा ये है, ये बिल भी हड़बड़ी में बनाया गया है। ये बिल पूरा ध्यान देके जिस तरह उसको बनाना चाहिए था वो भी नहीं हुआ है। ये एक जैसे एक चीज़ करना है तो एक बिल ले आए, एक अमेंडमेंट लाना है उस एक अमेंडमेंट ले आए। आप एक कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव विधेयक क्यों नहीं बना सकते? अगर कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव विधेयक बनाते सबको मशवरा करके, क्योंकि हम जब इस विधेयक के ऊपर चर्चा कर रहे थे डिफरेंट स्टेक होल्डर से, उनका दिक्कत भी हमने अपनी रिपोर्ट में रखा है।
The committee opinion that this type of piecemeal legislation is not sufficient to address the main objective of this act. Instead of that, we demand for a comprehensive legislation to address this issue, to control over the narcotic drugs and the psychotropic substances.
The committee also agreed with the insertion of new section 57A regarding the seizure of property of the arrested person by the notified officer, but said 180 days given for reporting illegally acquired property is too long. The committee also agreed with the view that investigating agencies should not be able to complete its finding in 60 days. It said the entire process should be finished in 90 days.
एक बड़ी बात इसमें रखा है, पहले जो स्टेट गवर्नमेंट उसको मॉनिटर कर रही थी, स्टेट गवर्नमेंट उनको परमिशन दे रहे थे, अब ये पूरा सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट करेगी। ये एक तरह से स्टेट का जो एम्पावर्ड हुए थे पहले से, वो अब सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट करेगी और सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट की एनडीपीएस ब्यूरो उसको, नारकोटिक्स ब्यूरो उसको मॉनिटर करेंगे। अगर वो मॉनिटर भी करेंगे, ठीक है, मॉनिटर करें, पर लोकल पुलिस और लोकल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के सपोर्ट के बिना वो कुछ कर नहीं पाएंगे।
So the mechanism should be strengthened. Actually, the weakness of the mechanism give space for strengthening, increasing these type of activities. The mechanism should be strengthened. Actually, I already mentioned that this a more comprehensive bill is needed to address this type of issues.
Repeated offences under NDPS Act invite punishment 1.5 times the quantum of the punishment of the first offence. In the bill, it was written as 1/2 of the penalty. The committee showed its dismay over the error and termed it lack of seriousness on the part of the government. The government has been asked to rectify the error without delay. It's a bill that has come after a long delay. Still, there are so many corrections to be made. The government is running out of time. Let's see if this bill gets passed from the House. With cameraman Vijay, Zagam Murtuza, Rajya Sabha TV.
The Standing Committee has asked the government to justify the link between the proposed punishment and the amount and quantity of narcotics that are seized. To tell us more on this, I am joined by my colleague Zagam Murtuza. Zagam, what are the concerns of the committee on this issue?
See, the committee has raised a concern over two major issues. The first one is the mandatory death penalty that is mentioned in the bill, and the second one is the quantum of the punishment. The committee has said that peddler, a trafficker, client or a courier cannot be treated as the same.
We spoke to Dr. Kavuri Sambasiva Rao, Member Standing Committee on Finance, and began by asking him about the major issues relating to the NDPS Amendment Bill.
Every one of us is aware these narcotics and drugs will affect particularly the new generation, the youngsters in the society who are mainly belonging to the upper class. And we understand that they are getting habituated to use this. So we wanted to check it. The government is very particular that they must put an iron hand on drug trafficking and drug peddlers and drug business, narcotics business. While doing so, the committee went into very many details. Suppose there can be some innocent fellow accompanying a rich man's son who is habituated to take a drug. then this man, the second man, is not innocent, but at that particular time when the authority goes and checks, there may be a little, like 1 gram, 2 gram, or very little item in his hand, and the quantum of punishment must not be the same what it should be given to a small boy or girl or student who has only 1 or 2 quantity, and a fellow who is doing it is a business in terms of tons of thing. So it has analyzed everything in that direction and intend to bring this legislation.
And you think that this legislation will curb the business of narcotics and drugs in India?
You know, when we see some of the mafia in the Western developed nations, they have got all the wisdom, weapons, and counter the legal agencies in their own wisdom. But when a government is very specific and then determined to curb this practice, the bulk of it can be controlled. There can be still something. And another important aspect to be taken into account is, it is observed the money that is being earned by these drug traffickers is running into hundreds and thousands of crores. And this unethical money, this illegal money, entering into the public life, and that is doing more damage to the economy of any country. So, second direction, that is also a major point to be curbed. So, keeping both these things in our mind, we wanted to bring it and enforce.
The standing committee has said that making a law is a different thing and enforcing the law is a different thing. Have you got the mechanism? The bill doesn't talk about the development of a mechanism to track such transactions or to curb the business of drugs and narcotics?
Once again, when we find the actual situation in the society, there are always some leakages. Suppose smuggling of drugs and narcotics is totally punishable, right up to giving a lifetime sentence. There are people who yield, some of the officers who are involved in it might yield to them, to the money they get in making the case weaker. Yes, you are right that enforcement is a very difficult job unless the people who are involved in enforcing it also are clear in the mind. Unless they are men of integrity, men of commitment, as you said, it may not be able to curb the entirely in this, but by and large we believe people that they do their job well. There can be 1 or 2 instances or 5, 10% or 20% of the people who are not committed, but still the purpose will be achieved to a great extent.
You talked about the quantum of the punishment. The bill says that there should be a mandatory death penalty, but the committee doesn't agree with this.
No, when I am a member of it, that means I have expressed my opinion also in this regard. So collectively we always, one good thing with the standing committees is it contains members from all the parties and all lines of thinking. And we discuss openly without keeping party in our mind. And we may differ in certain aspects, but we come to an unanimous conclusion and pass it. So there may be some adjustments finally in making a report, and in such occasions there can be some softness also in that regard.
And you think the government is serious about this?
Unless government is serious, why will it bring into the parliament? There is no need for them to bring into the parliament. And even if the government is extremely serious, for example, this Lokayukta, it took a lot of time for us. Comments are always there on this side or that side. Reservation of women in the legislatures. Though intention is fair and passed in Lok Sabha, some other section comes in. So all these things.
For the last 8, 9, 10 years you are in power. It took almost 20, 30 years to bring such a legislation, and yet it is not a law.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are points where the government can be found fault in this regard, or the parties in power can be found fault in the regard. I am there in the parliament in 1984. I have been seeing these things I myself have got a lot of pain in my mind that I also feel sometimes whether the government is serious in bringing the bill and implementing it effectively and all that. But I wish wisdom will dawn on the people at the helm of affairs. Some such bills must be interacted with the opposition before bringing into the parliament, introducing and then passing, and large discussion, if it were to be there, before bringing the bill and taking the acceptance of all opposition parties and make it acceptable to everybody, then it is easy for us, for the government to pass the bills without any loss of time.
We are now approaching the end of the show, but before we conclude, let me leave you with the concluding reactions of Dr. Yogendra Trivedi, Member, Standing Committee on Finance.
Mandatory death punishment is not advisable. First of all, you might run into conflict, with Supreme Court, because Supreme Court said death penalty has to be awarded only in the rarest of the rare cases. And to give a small illustration, if a young child, who doesn't understand much, if he is given a packet, just go and deliver it to so-and-so or give it in that shop without knowing the contents of the shop. And if he is found with the narcotic in the hand, he is equally guilty. So, should he be given a death sentence for that purpose? So, we must also draw the distinction. Those who are operating, from Colombia, from Mexico, from some of South American countries and operating a drug racket around the world, they should be viewed differently from innocent carriers, who may not be aware about what they are carrying. So, death sentence by itself it should be advocated in appropriate case. So, there can be a death sentence, but it should not be made mandatory.
Thank you for watching Standing Committee. We'll be back with a new episode and a new issue. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV.